It almost snowed last night in Florida, in Gainesville, and we are finishing the other book. This has been an extraordinary time. When we started to plan this, the three of us, we said, well, how many people do you think might come? And we said, well, maybe 30, 40. Well, our average is well above that, and little did we know that. And so we didn't anticipate that, but nor did we anticipate that we would be talking about American history and how a democracy can be damaged and destroyed for one group quite intentionally. We didn't think that we'd be talking about that at a time when the notion of they come and got me, but they come to you next. So we're in a I think we're in an interesting and challenging time in our current history. And for those of us like me who are old enough to remember how things were, for me it's memory, and for others it's history. And I hope that we don't repeat that. Our deepest hope is that you will take away from this series an interest in our past history and a commitment to a future that really rewards the sacrifices that many of us made in the past so we can have a democracy in our future. That's my little spoon. You will be getting a survey, sort of an evaluation of the whole program via email. Fill up your email address. It is anonymous. Please respond to it if you take some time. I also have an announcement about the Cotton Club, an event that's going to happen here. First, let me just a little bit about the Cotton Club. Think about this. We are on ground and in a place where not 100 years ago, we couldn't be like this here. But this was one of the places where folks who worked hard for other people 5 days a week could come on a Saturday night and have a hell of a good time listening to some good music. And as we sit here, I hope that at least I feel obligated to honor that, to honor those sacrifices and honor those folks who came here and had a hell of a good time on Saturday night so they could go on Sunday and pray well and on Monday and do well. There will be a fundraising event called When Gospel Meets Jazz, all right, at the Cotton Club Museum, right here. All right. On June 20th, from 7 to 9. Please take a look at it. Come by. Donate if you choose to be a part of it. This morning session should be interesting because we have live folks answering real questions posed by other live folks. So I give you Rik. The good Dr. Stevenson.
Good morning. Please give yourself a big round of applause. This has truly been a journey of love and excitement. I want to change the slide, please. First of all, I want us to think about why it is so important to not only have history, but have an accurate account of history. I read this quote a couple of weeks ago. It says, "We cannot build community unless we have a common knowledge of the past." If you go out to the club and you meet this tenderoni, y'all don't know what a tenderoni is. Somebody you find attractive. One of the first things you do is you ask questions because you want to know who they are, what your name is, what's your phone number. Nowadays, what's your IG? Because everything is built on history. Every relationship has some kind of history, and the depth of that history determines the growth of the relationship. And so when it comes to our experience here in America, it is important to understand that if history is not accurate, it will give us a false sense of who we are in relationship to one another. And I have a image of a person's mind. I don't know if you know it or not, but trees, plants, they grow phototropically and they grow gravitrophically. They grow down gravitrophically, that's the roots, and then they grow up phototrophically towards the sun. And the deeper the root, the stronger the growth up. You look at palm trees. Palm trees, their roots are as deep in the ground as the tree is on the top. And the same thing happens in community. If our kids have a shortened root of information, a shortened root of knowledge, if the root is not stable, then when they grow, they become very superficial. And so I think it's important that as we go further and we think about, next slide, please, what we're doing here and why we're doing it, I want us to understand that this project was a desire of Dr. Ron Carter, and soon to be Dr. Jackie Davis, where's she at? And myself. I had a chance of preaching at their ministry, and man, we had a blast. And out of that conversation and conversations we had about cultural competency and can't say that. Can I say DE&I in here? We decided that there were some other things we need to talk about. And so I want to start by framing the conversation. Though a research agenda may be culturally neutral, the science of examination must and should take into account the context or the epochs, the roles of culture, access to education, economics, and environment when examining people of African descent. One of the most important things about understanding African peoples, next slide, please, is we didn't stand on the west coast of Africa and say, you know what, we don't like it here. We kind of want to go to America and be slaves. That's not how it happened. They said, man, it's too hot. It didn't happen that way. And because of that, it is important, and I try to encourage my students to not only do bachelor's degrees and master's degrees, but to do PhDs, to do the kind of educational training that will get them to the root of what we understand as history. Malcolm X reminds us that we cannot rely on the oppressor to teach our kids. Next slide, please. And so I want to begin by showing you why it's so important for us, especially at the upper levels of academia, to engage in primary source data. Now, this particular document is an entry in a slave captain's logbook. God bless you. And he says he sailed from Liverpool in June 1791, arrived in Embarco September, and sailed from there to the West Indies in October with 274 Negroes, arrived in Barbados from Galinda, and then on 13th December sold 207 Negroes in Dominica, and then sailed from Dominica on 11 January and arrived at Liverpool the 12th February 1792. So when people say there's no such thing as a Middle Passage, it didn't happen, that's not true. Next slide, please. And so this is a screenshot from the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database. And if you look at it, you look over to the far left, you'll see where it says 1791 Christopher, that's the name of the ship. The slide I just showed you is from the author of that ship. The next slide says it sailed from the Congo. It went to Dominica with 270 slaves, and the captain's name is Charles Milne. So we have sources that tell us what actually happened. We can actually go back and read these documents. Next slide, please. And here is the accounting of what he sold. It says, account sales of 270 Negroes. And if you notice, the first man, his name is Juarez, he bought 68 slaves. He paid $72 a piece. At the bottom of it, you see where it says 270 slaves. So we can prove what happened. My primary area of interest is the Middle Passage. But I show that to demonstrate why it's so important for us not to allow someone else to do our research. That if we're serious about understanding who we are as a people, we have the documents. Now, this document was written in 1791, which means long before Black people in the 60s and 70s were getting PhDs in African American studies, this information existed. Somebody overlooked it. Someone neglected to put it in the textbooks. So when we were growing up in the 60s and 70s and they were talking about history and they never talked about Africa, it's not because the data didn't exist. The data's always been there. I actually own this logbook. I have the entire text, 125 pages. And it talks about the plantains. It talks about collards. It talks about okra. It talks about rice. It talks about Africans that were brought from Kumasi. It talks about the fact that when Africans came, they didn't bring slaves. They brought doctors and lawyers and people with animal husbandry skills, and they brought hoes. The two-hand hoe, the short-handled hoe that you use to plow the ground for rice. That was a joke. But we brought our tools with us, right? So having said that as a foundation of the importance that we have in our community to do our own research, I'm grateful for these two individuals who partnered with us to try to bring this series together. Next slide, please. And so racial violence and lynchings next slide, in Alachua County. You cannot talk about American history without talking about violence. To sanitize it and to romanticize it is to lie. When plunder becomes the way of life for a group of men in society over the course of time, they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. Next slide. And what happens then is we have a legalized system of murder. There was a law called the Casual Killing Act, where if an individual ran away from a plantation and they were pursued and they were caught and they resisted and they were killed, it was not considered a felony. It was a casual killing. Now, the act actually came into existence because so many of the plantation owners were sneaking down to the plantation and having sexual abusive relationships with these young people that now they're producing what they call quadroons. Light but not white. Black women with light complexions and straighter hair than those who came from Africa. And the Casual Killing Act came into existence because so many of these white women were beating these kids to death because they knew that she knew that their father was her husband. And a significant number of lynchings and murders of Black people, especially during the nadir. The nadir is a period between the end of the Civil War in the 1920s. Lynching was legalized. And here in Alachua County alone, you have in 1867, 5 lynchings. 1868, African-American man named Eli was lynched in Gainesville. 1892, next slide please, 2 lynchings. And it goes on and on and on. And so when we talk about civil rights, the question becomes, why is it that civil rights are only distributed out to one group of people? Next slide. Well, if you control the educational system, if you dictate what people read, if you burn books, if you restrict people from teaching true history, then you can control the narrative. You can control the way people think about one another. You can control how people look at one another. Restricting access to literacy education for certain groups has a long-standing place in the U.S. history, especially as a tool to purposely disrupt and damage the African-American community and deny them their civil rights and ability to exercise their own autonomy. How do you do that? You keep them undereducated. One of the reasons we have Black History Month, actually started Black History Week, was not to say that white history is not important. It was to demonstrate the importance of integrating the two concepts. There's a sense in which white male heteronormativity is the balance. It is the norm. And if we don't fit into that concept, if we don't fit into that category, we are dismissed. In 1867, the Union Academy was founded with the aid of the Freedmen's Bureau as the first school with African Americans in Gainesville, in Alachua County. It began with 175 students, initially 2 white female teachers from New England. And when they came down here to teach, they were threatened. Some of them had their houses vandalized simply because they wanted to educate people of African descent. Next slide, please. So my thesis for today's discussion centers around today's educational system in its context of unfulfilled civil rights. I argue that the education in Alachua County in particular and the nation in general is less about critical thinking, information accessibility, and discovery, and is more about returning control of education to the dominant culture, making America great again, 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 again. And the question is, when was America great for indigenous peoples? When was it? Amen. But my point is, especially in this particular slide, is that collaboration is necessary. We cannot afford to not be allies to one another. I mean, look around this room. It's predominantly people who don't look like me. Because allyship is necessary. It is important. And the only way to control one population is to cause another population to think that the other population is unimportant, that they're unworthy. Next slide, please. So what we have to do is change the paradigm. Dr. Suri McDougall, who happened to be a friend of mine, he wrote a book entitled Research Methods in Africana Studies, and he says this: comparative studies date back to the late 18th and 19th centuries when European anthropologists conducted a series of comparative studies that contrasted the physical attributes of Black and white people, looking at characteristics as skin color, hair texture, skull size, skull shape, facial structure, and posture. They began to create a system of visual segregation. How do you identify who's on your team? It's based on their skin, based on their hair, etc. And even science began to fortify this notion of racial inferiority. In these comparative studies, the differences were always found in favor of whites. And the implication always went far beyond the physiological. For example, physical differences were said to account for intelligence, lack of intelligence, superiority, and inferiority. Now, a couple weeks ago, we had a conversation at Hale Plantation, the homestead. And I rode up on my motorcycle. So I had on black leather, the black leather jacket and the black helmet. My bike is black. And a woman came over to me, young lady came over to me, and she said, you know, I feared for you when you weren't in your, she said, first of all, I didn't recognize you without a suit on. And then she said this, and it really touched my heart. She said, I feared for you wearing black on and being on that motorcycle, because if the cops called you, something could happen to you. Because we have been so trained to visualize and dismiss things that don't look like the norm. And that happens to our kids. Some of our young boys are put in the back of the class because the assumption is they can't learn as quickly, or they won't learn as quickly. I don't know if you've ever seen the video about the Doll test, but the Doll test is a study that was done by the Clarks, and they argued that black kids as early as the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade began to desire white dolls because they saw black dolls as being bad dolls. And so even the psychology of our kids is affected by what they learn and when they learn it and how they learn it. Next slide, please. And so Thomas Jefferson says this: "To our reproach, it must be said that though for a century and a half we have had under our eyes the races of black and the red men, they have never yet been viewed by us as subjects of natural history. I advance it, therefore, as a suspicion only that blacks, whether originally distinct race or made distinct by time and circumstances, are inferior to the whites and to the endowments both in the body and mind. It is not against experience to suppose that different species of the same genus or varieties of the same species may possess different qualifications." This is the 3rd president of the United States who argues that black people were inferior. And so when you have this top-down kind of concept of inferiority, next slide, please, you have to be concerned about what our kids are being taught. With the rise of resistance and the government-led prohibition of teaching and acknowledging African-American studies in middle schools, high schools, and universities is essential and necessary to examine the role and responses to white supremacy and racism in Florida's education of black people in Alachua County and the U.S. We have a responsibility to make sure that our kids are not undereducated. In the black community, many of our HBCUs were started in our churches. And I would argue that we have a responsibility, those of us who are in teaching positions, leadership positions, in religious organizations and other types of organizations, take on the mantle. When we can't teach it in the university, we'll teach it in our homes. I began to learn about black history in 1965 in the basement of a friend of my mother's who wanted us to know our past because we didn't have it in school. And it is a civil right to have access to a meaningful and accurate education. That is a civil right. Thank you. Next slide. Go back. I'm sorry. The early 17th and 18th centuries were littered with rules, laws, and prohibitions against indigenous peoples and free and enslaved black African Americans. The sentiments of the Southern whites and colonists were ruled by racism and white supremacist ideologies. The founding fathers were creators and proponents of racism and radicalized education. Next. Do you know that the majority of your Ivy League schools, Princeton, Yale, Harvard, they were all seminaries. They began as schools to teach religion. We're going to talk in a minute about Matthew Dewey, who went to Lincoln University. I went to Lincoln University. My sister went to Lincoln University. My brother went to Lincoln University. And my oldest son went to Lincoln University. It's the oldest degree-giving black HBCU in the country. Because we couldn't go to Harvard. We couldn't go to Yale. Well, we had a couple, W.B. Du Bois, the first African-American to earn a PhD from Harvard. Carter G. Woodson, the founder of Black History Month, the second African-American to earn a PhD from Harvard. But those are exceptions. And so it requires us to take into account that if we're really going to understand the role of civil rights, it begins with understanding the importance of education. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, most of us have been taught that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Right? But we all know that those black people were fighting. They freed themselves. It was a collaborative concept, but listen to this. And no one ever tells us that. He says this, I am not now, nor ever have been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of white and black races. I am not now, nor ever have been, in favor of making voters or jurors of the Negroes or of qualifying them to hold office, nor of intermarriages with white people, end quote. Now raise your hand if you ever heard that about Abraham Lincoln. Well, hallelujah. Some of y'all didn't know, thank God. There is a physical difference between the white and the black races. Yeah, we do run faster because we used to run from lions. That's the joke. Which will forever forbid the two races living together on social or political equality. There must be a position of superior and inferior, and I am in favor of assigning the superior position to the white man. The President of the United States, the 16th president, said that. So now we wonder why, what's the new president's name? He thinks the same way? Next slide. Next one. The question is, what has been done and accomplished by the school district to address these issues? Now, I want to thank the mayor and all the other elected officials who are here. I'm going to do 2 more slides, and then I'm going to bring them up so we can ask them some questions, and then I'll come back because some of them have to leave early. But one of the most important things about the preamble of the Declaration of Independence is that all people, all men are created equal. Now, obviously, when the framers wrote that, they weren't talking about women. That's why it says all men. And they weren't talking about black men. But it says that you are endowed by your Creator with certain inalienable rights that include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is something that God gave us. Now, if you're an atheist, I ain't mad at you. Somebody gave it to you. But you have the right to live in harmony. And in order for us to change the environment in which we live, we have to challenge the government. We've got to challenge the administration. We've got to challenge the educational systems to do their job. History is ugly. I'm a historian. That's what I do. And my heart was broken when I earned my first doctorate degree trying to understand why black people would become Christians. I never realized that Africans were selling Africans. That's ugly, but it's true. You can't avoid it. Now, obviously, they weren't sold because they were black. They sold because some of them committed adultery. Some of them were lost in the war. Some people sold themselves into slavery. But it wasn't perpetual. In those days, actually, if you were enslaved, you could actually live and marry into the family who enslaved you. So there's a significant difference. And that's where the importance of education comes. I'm going to close with this, and I'm going to bring the panel up. The anti-literacy laws employed in many southern states, especially between the 1740s and 1867, were designed to prohibit the enslaved and sometimes free African Americans from reading and writing. In 1742, Jefferson passed a law that said if you're 13 years old and you can't read or write, you cannot be a citizen. And then they passed laws that prohibited people of African descent to learn how to read. According to Dario Tobo, he says this: restricting access to literacy education for certain groups has a long-standing place in the U.S. history, especially as a tool of purposely disrupting and damage the African-American community and deny them their civil rights and the ability to exercise their own autonomy. In other words, this didn't happen by accident. And because it was made up, it can be broken up. Because someone else designed it, it can be redesigned. The question is, are we willing to do the work? So I'm going to ask the the elected officials to come on up to the panel. If you wouldn't mind, let's give them all a hand, please. I just had the pleasure of being there. And Jackie, you have those questions? We're going to take about 5 questions from the floor. We have composed a couple questions and Mayor has to leave. We want to make sure he gets a chance to get out on time, but we wanted you to get a chance to have a conversation with the individuals who are not only responsible, but in a position to make some of the necessary changes that we need in our community, especially when it comes to education, when it comes to housing, when it comes to economics, when it comes to, thank you, Jackie, employment, etc. So, you have another mic? If each of you would just give us a brief introduction, I'll run the floor with the mic, and if you want to ask questions, you have an opportunity. So let's start with Mr. Vu and we'll work around.
Hi, my name is Thomas Vu. I'm the newly elected school board member for Alachua County in Florida. And, thank you. And I took office in November, and I ran a part for a large reason of the very things we're talking about today. So I'm just happy to be here, and I welcome your questions, even the hard ones. So please bring them.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Harvey Ward. I've been mayor of Gainesville since January of 23. I served two terms on the Gainesville City Commission prior to that. Grew up and have lived my whole life here in Gainesville. Never lived west of Waldo Road until I finished college. I care a lot about this community, obviously. We all do. That's why we're here. There's a lot more I need to learn, and I am here as much to hear and to learn as to answer questions, but as Thomas said, bring the hard questions. That's how we do better. We don't do better if we don't ask the hard questions.
Good morning. I'm Chuck Chestnut, Alachua County County Commissioner, and I guess I've been in office since 2012. Previously, I was a city commissioner, and then I went to the legislature, and now I came back home to serve on the county commission. And out of my 20 years of service to Alachua County, I've always been disappointed in terms of things not really being done in East Gainesville or the eastern portion of the county. And so we'll talk about that later as we get into it for some of the reasons why that happened. But I just wanted to share that with you before we get started. Thank you.
Thank you. So here's the first question. Well, let me read this first. By the 1820s, the United States claimed legal ownership of Florida territory. Don Fernando de la Maza Arriando, a merchant from Havana, received a land grant to settle Alachua County and actively recruited white settlers in the area. By 1860, 40 years later, African Americans, mostly enslaved, constituted 54% of Alachua County's population. Though relatively few lived in Gainesville itself, only 46 out of 269, this demographic reality created constant anxiety among white residents who feared losing political and social control. Here's a question. That control participated in the education or the lack thereof of Black people. And so it created an educational gap. Why has the achievement gap between Black and white students persisted or widened despite the implementation of a 2018 equity plan which aimed to close the gap within 10 years?
Seems like it's a question for me. The way I like to think about it was there was a world before this report, there was a world after this report. But to me, how we saw the issues did not change. All the 2018 report did was put numbers and facts to something we already all knew and we all felt. And I think about what's happened between now and then, at least in terms of the school system, nothing has fundamentally changed at all. All we've done is we've taken the core system, which to me is really bad. I would like to say it's rotten, but we've just put systems around it or tried to patch it, but it really hasn't made a difference. I think about it in terms of the school system. What we focused on is access over actual education, access over achievement, access over ability. We're giving students these opportunities, but how much are we really focused on making sure they learn? So much of that BEBR report was focused on those third grade metrics, because all those statistics and studies show if you can't read at the end of third grade, wow, your educational prospects, your prospects for your career, prospects for your life expectancy, whether or not you're going to engage into a life of criminality, they all skyrocket. And to me, that's where the focus really should have been. I think about all the inequities in the district, and a lot of them have to do with incentivizing teachers to want to teach at our lower grade schools. Have we done that at all? No. The state's done it by giving us money, but have we, Alachua County, changed any structures to do that? No. I'm a big believer in that we need a really big fundamental shift in how we spend our money and how we operate education in Alachua County. A large part of it is making sure we incentivize good teachers to want to come teach at our lower performing schools, especially the ones with predominantly lower performing students have African American, Black, Brown, poor, rural populations. And I don't know why we don't do this. Other districts do this. I've been looking at studies of other counties and school systems that have done this, the biggest one being Dallas ISD, which literally incentivize and giving teachers bonuses for teaching in an F school. You get a bonus for teaching a D school, a C school, things like that, and we have to start doing that. There's a lot of barriers and structures in place, but to me, we just kind of shrug and have been like, this is really hard, let's do something else. For real though, in reality, I feel like that's what the school system has done, and I felt this as a teacher. I taught at Lincoln, I taught at Eastside, and one of the biggest things I think about and still cry about was I did crop and credit recovery, and I did 21st century, and those are often students who are low performing, often students who are failing classes, or who's literally like their families are just looking for places to put them over the summer, but they don't want to be there. These are some of the smartest kids you'll ever meet, and they don't know it. Like, I'm not even kidding, like it's crazy. And then I still remember doing an activity where we're, you know what, let's go on Google Maps. We're gonna pick any place in the world, and we're gonna just walk the streets using Google, street maps, right? Do you know what all these kids did? They put in their address of where they live and just walked the neighborhood they already live in. And to me, that was like, wow, we have, these children already feel so defeated, they don't wanna dream, they don't wanna go out and try to think, hey, here's what life could be someplace else, right? That whole idea of hope, that idea of dreaming, I've realized in itself is a privilege. The ability to hope and the ability to dream is a privilege in this county and in this community. And I will never stop hearing in my head a girl, when asking what she's looking forward to, she said, I can't wait to get a job at McDonald's. So there's a lot to be done, and we haven't done it. And I think about the equity report that the district created in 2018 in response to this, and I think about their goals. And one of their goals was to increase the achievement of Black students by 3% a year. Well, guess what? It's actually lower today than it was in 2018.
Have mercy.
And so what have we really done? How have we held ourselves accountable? And we really haven't. I feel like it's a symptom of Alachua County Public Schools where we love to create ideas, we love to create goals, but the plans to get to those goals is really what's always been missing. There's no plans, there's vibes, there's ideas to do things, there's concepts of a plan, but no actual implementation, no accountability. And so that's just something I would really love to see, and that's something I'm going to really try to push for. And just once we get out of this budgetary mess, I am way more hopeful of the future. But the reality today is really bad, and there is some progress. But when it comes to the question is, are we educating our kids better? Are we educating Black kids better? The answer to that is unequivocally no.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So Thomas, 100% correct, and letting. I try not to tell people what education ought to be because I'm not a trained educator and I hadn't run for school board. So I try not to get too deep in that. The city's role, and probably the county's role too, although I'm not going to get in your business either.
I don't get into it.
is the city's role is, where do we show up as leaders? And I mean really show up, not just drive by and stop in for a minute or two. Where do we show up and where do we spend the people's money? And for many, many years at City Hall, the decision was, and it wasn't a conscious decision to leave somebody out, but the decision was to chase population and to put resources where population was going. And we are now in a situation where an enormous chunk of the city is becoming less dense consistently, East Gainesville, but it's still part of the city, so we're still responsible for it. So the only obvious thing to do now, and the only right and moral thing, is to spend money, the people's money, in East Gainesville. That takes a long time. Government building moves very, very slowly, but that's, I think, where we need to be. You build things, you show up, so that you get structures, social structures, surrounding that benefit everyone. That's the hope. That's kind of the Hail Mary pass to bring things back around and change the focus. Educationally, we're ridiculous if we think that the school system is going to be able to make massive improvements when we can't make improvements to financial equity, to the huge money gap that exists in Gainesville and Alachua County. So that becomes the sort of the city's responsibility. If mom and dad, or mom or dad, are working 2 or 3 jobs and visiting a variety of agencies to try to keep the lights on and the rent paid, guess what? Little Johnny is not going to do well at school the next day. It doesn't matter what the school system is doing if parents are unable to keep up financially and socially, then their children are not going to be able to succeed, no matter what they look like. But we all know that race and class and money all over the South particularly are intertwined. So we have to face those issues of race and class and money in our community, and a way we can do that is by leaders showing up in the right places and by making sure that we spend the people's money strategically to make that happen. So I could go on and on, but I want to make sure we get someone who has all the experience in the world at this stuff to tell us what I'm missing.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'm just going to say this. 20 years ago, it was an election, and it was about the haves and the have-nots. And the have-nots never received anything, but the haves did. And it is that way today, in my opinion. And I'm sorry, I'm not an educator, but I think the problem to me with education is we're not teaching the basics anymore. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. We're not doing that anymore for our kids. A lot of our kids are not on par by the 3rd grade. They say you can determine the number of prison beds in the future. Now that is a sad statistic. Very, very sad. And as the mayor stated about not having the resources in your community, not having a grocery store, not having an emergency room, all of these inequities exist still today. Even after this report in 2018, it still exists today. The Alachua County, we tried to address it. We did resolutions. We did a resolution for the Equity Advisory Board to create an advisory board. We created an equity manager. We tried to look at our policies to address the policies of those inequities. We did a matrix system in Alachua County about it. I have it right here, about how we're going to address the inequities that occur, especially in housing, planning, healthcare, and all of that stuff. We put that in our plan. We also added into our comprehensive plan an equity component. Even with recently with the Wild Spaces Public Placings funding for the back roads of roads that we've had over the years, try to adjust that. We put an equity component in that where that we can do neighborhoods where in the past the county never did neighborhoods, streets, in terms of repaving, but we put that part into the neighborhoods that normally don't get that type of services from the county. So we did add those equity components from this study, and that's how we came up with this metrics in the county. So that's what we have done as a county commission, and I think that one of the most important part that we did take home was the Truth and Reconciliation process in Alachua County. And I have to give credit to Commissioner Hutchinson for bringing that forth to the commission. And I kind of picked up the mantle after that. And we also did the Truth and Reconciliation process also stemmed into the lynchings that happened in Alachua County. And then we created the Community Remembrance Project to address those issues and all of that. But we had to do a resolution through the county so that we could get funding to be able to have those events for the lynching victims in Alachua County. So those are some of the things we have done. But the problem with education to me is going back to the basics. Once our kids get the basics, I think that they can succeed. But if they're not getting the basics, they're not going to succeed. And of course, a lot of folks have come from low-income areas, but have succeeded and became doctors, lawyers, and all of that stuff. So they can succeed, but we just have to go back to the basics to make sure they master those basics. And then if they got those basics, they can succeed, in my opinion. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. So I have several pictures on the screen, and I selected those pictures primarily because I'm not a segregationist at all, but I do believe that there is something special about seeing a Black teacher teaching Black kids who understand where they're going, where they're heading, what they have to experience. And one of the reasons that we started The Other Book is because Black teachers had the other book. They had the book that the school district gave them, and then they had the book that they hid under the desk that nobody knew about except the Black students when white people weren't around. And if this system that we're under now is trying to put us back into a situation where we have to rely on our own to teach our kids, those kids will become successful. If you look at HBCUs, a significant number of our Black doctors come from HBCUs. Our Black lawyers come from HBCUs. Our city officials come from HBCUs. And so in a sense, if you want to kick us out, fine, we'll do better if we do it ourselves. That is not desire. That may be the goal. It is important that we understand that sometimes Black kids need to see Black faces. Brown kids need to see brown faces. I went to an HBCU. I went to a PWI. Most of my training has been in PWIs. And a lot of what I learned, I had to relearn and unlearn to do what I do now. And so I put this up here, first of all, to demonstrate the size of the classrooms and why. In the top left corner, there is a school that's a wooden building. The one next to it is a school that's a little bit more progressive. But in the far right, you see what the kids are doing? They're sweeping the floor. They weren't just learning education, they were learning how to take care of their own stuff. And they learned it because they were in an environment where they were not only being educated, they were being loved. They were being cared for. Next slide, please. This classroom in 1955 is a first grade classroom with a firewood stove heater, and the age limits could be from 3 to 20. Can you imagine trying to teach a 3-year-old and a 20-year-old simultaneously how to read? And yet we did it because we understood the importance. Next slide, please. So civil rights are an essential component of democracy. Civil rights are an essential component of democracy. They're guarantees of equal social opportunities and protection under the law, regardless of race, religion, and other characteristics. Examples are the rights to vote, to a fair trial, to government services, and public education. That is what a civil right is. And for the most part, in our Black communities, the ball has been dropped. And especially here in Alachua County, as we go further. Next slide, please. I'm gonna leave it up there for now. I want you to think about your individual role in helping to change this narrative. Some of you have been to every single one of our sessions, which suggests to me you have a concern about what's going on in Alachua County. And the truth of the matter is, this is what we need to make the difference. We need this collaboration. The fear of the American culture is what's happening in this room right now. Some of you may have heard the name Fred Hampton. He was murdered in his bed, but he organized the first Rainbow Coalition. They weren't just Black Panthers. There were Hispanics from Chicago. There were whites from West Virginia. They were a coalition of people who came together to solve the problem of civil rights. And so this conversation today is not just about civil rights in Alachua County, it's about civil rights across this nation. And we can be a model, we can be a template of what it looks like to make the necessary narrative changes. I'm going to ask one more question, then I'm going to give it to the floor. And that question is this. It goes back to something that you said about third grade. Given that third grade reading proficiency rates for African American students in some schools remain as low as 9 to 15%, what targeting strategies are being employed or can be employed to address these foundational literacy issues, and how is progress being monitored? Now, I say that because of this. Black people make up 14% of the American population, but we make up over 55% of the prison population. Why? Because of the school to prison pipeline. It's directly connected to reading and literacy. So the question is, what is being done, and what can we do? What can you do? How can we help you solve this problem?
Yeah, I guess it's me first.
You're the guinea pig today.
Yeah, that's totally okay. Totally okay. The first thing I thought about was a conversation I had with Tina, who's in the audience here, and it was about a year ago, and she was talking about that, about third grade, this response to this report, and she was talking to the superintendent at the time, Karen Clark, about why aren't we doing more K through 2 before these kids hit third grade? And her response was, well, the state doesn't test for accountability until third grade. But right, exactly. And so it's this whole idea to me that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Why aren't we targeting most of our resources in that K through 2, in those primary grades that aren't state tested for accountability, but will pay dividends years along the road? Instead, we get to third grade and kids are behind, right? So, and then we panic. And I'm not sure if you all know this, but there's only one mechanism that holds a kid back, K through 12, by the state, and that's the third grade reading test. They have to score a 2 out of 5 to move on to to fourth grade. A 2 is still below reading level. A 3 is like barely at reading level. And also, they've introduced a host of alternate ways to promote students. And so essentially what we do is we throw every single thing we can at the student, and then eventually, just by luck, for a lot of them, they're going to get that score to then go on to fourth grade. But then what happens? They're behind. And then between then and getting a diploma, there are 0 state mechanisms that ensure that a student is learning and is ready to learn on the grade level that they're at. Not until they try to get a diploma, when they have to pass the Algebra 1 EOC and the grade 10 reading ELA test. And guess what? A lot of these students who were 1s in 3rd grade are 1s all through high school and all through their careers and just can't pass these tests. And so what does the state do? They're going to give concordance scores. You can now take all these tests in a limited amount of time until you get the right score, or you can be diagnosed as an ESE student and get an exception. So you can be a level 1 throughout your entire school career, not know how to read, not how to do basic arithmetic, and get a high school diploma. And so one, there's a lot of structures in place that are really bad. These are set by the state. And I think about what we have done in response. We always go path of least resistance, the easiest solution. And I think to myself, all the things we've done. But first, I want to directly answer the question in terms of monitoring. There is progress monitoring, right? We do have data. The state's implemented a 3 times a year system. The one for K through 2, I actually like and is good. I'll actually give them that. But then it's what do we do with it? And we really don't do enough. From the district level, a lot of it's, hey, schools, figure it out. And they get resources, they get stuff from the state, but it's one of these things to where why don't we already have systems in place for support? And to me, this also then isolates these additional supports based on geography. But to me, when you think about all the lowest performing groups, and they've been groups that have just historically been disadvantaged, I'm sorry, but Black, brown, poor kids, they live all over the county. The biggest Title I population at a school isn't on the east side, it's on the west side. And that's one of those biggest things too, is that we talk about education in terms of geography, but if we only talk about it in terms of geography, we're ignoring the fact that a system needs to be healthy and good, and it needs to be able to support students all over the county who are struggling. But then to circle back to what I was saying, at least that's what we do, right? But we don't do a good enough job doing the data. And then I think about what we actually do to try to help students. A lot of it's just kind of propping it up. I think about, like, again, 3rd grade. Instead of just helping kids to learn how to read, focus on the basics and the fundamentals K through 2, we just wait till 3rd grade and then panic. I think about everything we've done since then about, equity, and to me it's always Band-Aids. It's always the easiest solution. I think about the racial inequities and how our magnet programs are predominantly white and Asian. So what did we do? Let's lower the standards and create a lottery system, and then hopefully we'll get more Black and brown students. And to me it's like, so wait, your way of getting more Black students into magnet programs is to lower the standards and then give them a random chance? Why not just actually teach them and give them the ability to succeed and to do well in these programs, and then actually convince them and show these families that these programs have great value to them? That's hard, right? That's harder work than just creating a lottery and lowering standards. I think about the same thing with discipline. I think discipline needs to be standard across the county. And one of the biggest things that I've gotten pushback and heard pushback from the county on is, well, if you make discipline uniform, that's going to make the racial disparities of discipline offenses worse. But to me, it's also communicating, we don't think Black kids can behave well, and we'd rather not have bad numbers. And to me, that just flies in the face of everything I've heard from those with experience. And I think about, you talk a lot about, we can't let the oppressor be the ones who are teaching us. But, when I think about education and the pedagogy and all that, all these predominant sources are white. There are no really Black research that we use. We use the research from white researchers. And so again, what does the county try to do? Oh, it's really hard to get Black, brown, poor, rural kids to pass classes. What do? Let's make the minimum grade 50%. Let's lower the standards, because the only way our kids can achieve is to lower the bar. And when I was just in Los Angeles at the College Board, a Dream Deferred conference, and basically learning about successful Black leaders in education all over the country. And every single one of them says the same thing. You only change achievement by raising the bar, by having high standards, by being tough on the kids. That doesn't mean you don't love them. You're actually showing them love by teaching them that you expect a lot from them. And it's when we expect a little, very little, or the bare minimum from kids is where we fail. And I just think to my own personal experience, I've told this story a lot, but I grew up in a broken home. I grew up with Vietnamese refugee family. Mental health is not something that they acknowledge. They don't acknowledge it for themselves. They don't self-reflect. They don't think about emotions because they were living a life where they were just trying to survive every day. So as a kid, I grew up like a lot of our kids do in a high anxiety, high anger, emotional household. My mom was single for a long time before she got remarried, and she was working all the time. I barely ever saw her. I would cook frozen Totino's pizzas for dinner for my brother and sister. But I loved going to school. School felt like a place where I felt safe. But it's very clear that in our community, a lot of our kids don't feel safe at school. A lot of our kids don't feel like school can teach them. And so much I just want to bring what school was for me to our kids, and especially the ones who are struggling, because I don't know what it could possibly be like for them if they don't have that. And when I think about that, it's really tough. And it makes me want to fix everything like with a snap of a finger if I could, but I know I can't. And so when I think about what the community can do is a lot needs to be done. When I think about any time we want to make big moves, there's always a big pushback. We're kind of seeing that nationally now. Right. Right. Ooh, not kind of, actually are. And so that's going to happen. I know right now we're in this budgetary mess, but after that, I really want to see us make big moves. I want to see us make big changes in how we compensate our employees and then the programs we have for our kids and then where we focus our resources. This whole mentality that exists in our county right now is we'll catch them up in high school. There is zero research that shows that.
Thank you.
So anyway.
Thank you. Thank you.
When my first daughter was first born, we leaned on our pediatrician a lot, my wife and I did, because we figure you got to have an expert at whatever it is in your life. I believe you need an expert to kind of guide you in the direction. I don't know anything about babies when we had our first baby, so we leaned on the pediatrician. Pediatrician, one of the first things she told us was, your job is to read. Read to your kids, but read. Let your children grow up watching you read. One of the biggest markers, I'm told, of success for children growing up is whether or not they grow up around books. If there are books in the house, they're more likely to think that there ought to be books in the house and to use those books. If children see their role models doing something, they're likely to follow that role model. And if you model reading as a behavior from the time children can look around and see anything and be aware of anything, then they know that that's a thing people do. If you are not able to model that behavior because nobody modeled it for you, that reading isn't a norm in your home, then the people who grow up in your home are not going to think that reading is a norm either. If we as a society expect that we want that reading is a marker of success, and clearly it is, then we've got to model that behavior for very young children. Right. And then we won't have to worry about whether or not they're ready to read by third grade. And we won't be planning for that third grader to be in prison 10, 15, 20 years down the road. Now, I love going to schools and library and reading for groups of small kids, but the big white guy who doesn't look like the people I'm around all the time coming to my school and reading to me, that might be interesting, but that is not a modeled behavior. That's different. Which leads me to a major concern that I have for our community that I honestly don't know how to fix, is that we do have successful young black men and black women growing up in this community, but they leave. They go to an HBCU or they go to college somewhere else and don't come back. You remember 2018, we were real close to electing Florida's first black governor, who grew up right here in Gainesville much of his young life. Phenomenal, brilliant person who, as soon as he could leave Gainesville, left Gainesville for Tallahassee and didn't come back. Not that he didn't care about Gainesville, but there wasn't something here for him. Nothing about Gainesville said, I need to go back home after school other than to visit. We are missing a black middle class, a vibrant and growing black and middle and upper middle class in our community, which is not to say there are not black middle class and upper middle class folks in our community. There are, clearly, but it is as a big chunk of our city, it's not there the way that it is in Tallahassee, the way that it is in Jacksonville, Tampa, Orlando, and Miami. And part of that is there's no institution, because I love my alma mater, but my alma mater does not hire a lot of black folks. And the University of Florida is not very good at growing the black middle class and the upper middle class. So role models who look like kids growing up in Duval, and kids growing up in Porters, and kids growing up in Phoenix, for goodness sake, they're not there to read to them.
Sure.
Because the people who have succeeded, who look like them, have gone somewhere else. Yeah. Not entirely, but in large measure, that has been the case. And that that's part of why we've got this gap. I don't know what the fix to that is, but I'm willing to hear from you anytime. Call me about that, because that is a major concern that I don't really know how to fix.
And it's becoming more difficult to get people to come here and to teach in our systems, right? Yes, sir, you want to respond?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I'm a proponent of preschool, because I think if the kids get it in preschool, instead of just babysitting the kid, but teaching the kids his ABCs, how to count to 50 or 100, I think is very, very important. So when they do get to kindergarten, they are prepared to succeed. But just having them housed just to babysit them all day till their parents get off from work, I think is a disadvantage to those children. Right. And secondly, I think I wrote things, but that the hard part about parents reading to their children is that the parent can't read.
Yeah.
So if the parent can't read, how can they read to their children? They probably want to.
Yeah.
But they can't read. Yeah. And it's sad. We used to have programs in the public library to teach people how to read. I don't think that even occurs anymore, to teach people, because they think people know how to read now, and that's not the case. A lot of people in our community cannot read, folks, and that is serious. And I'm surprised this day and time, really. It shocks, excuse my language, the hell out of me that people can't read at this point. And then one thing I think, schools, I'm sorry. We gotta go back to the basics. People aren't teaching phonics anymore. Yeah. How do you attack a word when you don't know how to? Yeah. You can't remember a word, just keep memorizing the word. Yeah. That's not reading. You got to teach them the phonics, how to. I'm sorry. It's just frustrating to me, because, there are a lot of people in this community are doing bad because they didn't have the resources to take advantage of, to make it, to even help their children. I mean, if poverty is all you know, poverty is all you're going to have. Yeah. You can't think beyond poverty because you've never seen it. Right. And that's kids in our community. I remember Tuscaloosa. We did that area out there, bought that for a summer camp area. And one of my reasons supporting it was that it will give the disadvantaged kids an opportunity to go to camp. A lot of African-American students have never been to camp. Right. And so it gives them that opportunity and that experience of camp. So we have a lot of problems in this community, and I wanted to share it. I asked my county manager, I said, this report, Understanding Racial Inequities in Alachua County, it was done by the University of Florida in the Friendship 7, they called it, the county, the city, the university, UF Health, and all of that stuff. And it's really sad that much hasn't been done with this. Yeah. It's like it's on the shelf collecting dust. We're not going to worry about it unless somebody start raising hell about it. Yeah. And so far, nobody's raised hell about it, so it probably stays on the shelf collecting dust. And so I'm just really disappointed.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. I want to say two things. I'll take a question from the floor. The other side of that is most of us in here, many of us in here, some of us in here are grandparents or great-grandparents. So we ain't teaching our kids how to read. They should be reading by now. But the other part is this. So my youngest son, well, both my sons, my youngest most frequently, whenever he went out the house, he had to take a book. When he was a kid, he always had a book. I didn't care where he was going, all the way up until he was like 14, 15 years old. He took a book. Want to play basketball? Take a book. You know, I'm riding, we're going to the store, take a book. And I would make him read in the car with me. So one day, he's asking me, and he would always ask me questions. So one day we're riding down the street, he's about 17 now, and I realized he wasn't as inquisitive as he used to be. So I said to him, Corey, how come you don't ask me as many questions as you used to? He said, Dad, I got Google. I don't need you no more. So now I'm replaced by a platform, right? But here's the point. Now in his 30s, when he calls me, he says, Dad, I did this research. I arrived at these conclusions. What do you think? So now he has learned the importance of not only doing the research and writing, but now he comes to me not to tell him what to do, but to see if he's on the right track, right? It is important that when we have parents who are not able to teach their kids, that we start working with them as well. We have to create a safe environment. I'm teaching a summer class, and this goes back to what people really want to learn. Obviously, there are some things about African American studies people want to learn. I'm teaching a summer class, Intro to African American Studies. There are 77 students enrolled in my class in the summer. It's an online class, but those who are in my class know I'm not going to lower the bar. If you lower the bar, they'll hit it every time. But if you raise it and then build a ladder so they can climb it, they'll come. And I think that you're right. We can't lower the bar, right? But we need teachers who understand how people learn. One of the biggest problems in the classroom, come on. One of my students is here, former students. One of the first things I ask them on the first day of class is, do you know how you learn? And I write down each student's learning ability. Are you audio? Are you visual? Are you kinesthetic? And when I prepare my lectures, I prepare them with those goals in mind. So everyone walks out of the classroom learning something. That's the teacher's responsibility. And for the most part, if you're not a part of our culture, you don't know how we learn. My dad never took me out and said, here, read this book on how to fix brakes. He took me outside, put me under a car, and took the brakes off and said, now do it. I learned it kinesthetically. And so I think that when it comes to the teachers and hiring, we have to take into account how these people understand their role as disseminating information. Do they have the ability to communicate in multidimensional manners? Because if not, the kids are going to seem as if they're undereducated or undereducatable, when in fact it's not the kid, it's the teacher. Y'all, if this was church, I would ask for an offering. I'd click, lock the doors. I'd say the ushers, lock the doors. But okay, the mayor has to leave in a minute, so I want to give you a couple questions. Minutes for questions, yes.
So this question is for the mayor. I was just wondering what the city is doing to address the employment inequity. Are they doing anything to encourage the growth of businesses that would offer employment for African-American people or people in East Gainesville?
Thank you for the question, Jackie. So one of the things that we're investing in and that we've partnered with the county on and partnered with UF Health on was the Eastside Health and Economic Development Initiative on Hawthorne Road. Many of you are probably familiar with GTEC. It's been there a long time. There are 22, 23 businesses and organizations, very small, growing inside GTEC. It's a business and nonprofit incubator that has about 125 people working any day, any business day on Hawthorne Road. People forget that that's there because it's been there for a while. We just partnered to build, make sure that it was built, a UF Health clinic there, which started out as an urgent care clinic, but I will give credit to UF Health for listening to the community after multiple sessions, some of which you all were at Lincoln Middle School, where the community said, we don't need a doc in the box. We're not interested in that. We need better than that. So not only does that clinic have an x-ray facility and a lab facility on site, it has a community meeting space, it has art on the walls by local artists only, and is doing a job of intentionally hiring local folks whenever possible to do the work at that clinic. The city, for our next steps on that, is building out more on that same site. That site is on Hawthorne Road. It will eventually, in the next month or two, we will have finished a street between Hawthorne Road and Southeast 8th Avenue that gives the community of Lincoln Estates better access up to the rest of the city. We're also putting an RTS transfer hub next to the clinic. We will be building out commercial pads for businesses to be built there. We are about to put out on the street an invitation to negotiate for a grocery store to be built, purpose-built on site. There have been many 20 years of stops and starts for a grocery store at the old Food Lion facility across the street from that. That's not going to work. If it hadn't worked after 20 years, it ain't going to work. So our new tactic is, let's see if somebody wants us to help them build a building from the ground up there on that site and help a grocery store grow up right there. I don't know if that'll be successful, but we're putting it out there with the intent of you're going to have to hire some people from the neighborhoods to do that. And the intent there for the whole E-Heady facility, which when it's said and done is going to be about $40 million worth of investment on Hawthorne Road, between Hawthorne Road and Southeast 8th Avenue, we're spending the money there with the hope of bringing private money to follow it and jobs to follow it. But the first jobs right there are UF Health jobs in that clinic, which again is not your average doc in the box clinic. It's an actual health clinic that, by the way, is about to open up regular doctor visit hours on weekday mornings as well, in addition to just drop-ins. So that is succeeding, and we hope that the next steps will continue to succeed, and we can't walk away from it. We've burned the boats on this one. We've already started the process of building that out. The money is committed, so there's very little that will stop all that from moving forward, but it's kind of theoretical. You know, we don't know what the success is going to be, but we're using best practices and are hopeful that will work. That's the best example of what we're doing right now. We do smaller projects, you know, all over the place, particularly downtown and a little east of downtown in the GCRA. We're doing business improvement grants to help grow local businesses on site where they are and to reinvest. I see Brittany Coleman is here with our Impact GNV operation, which is doing an unbelievable job with lots and lots of community partners of lowering gun violence. You don't grow businesses where people are afraid there's going to be gun violence. So we're doing everything we can to make a safer community, and we're succeeding. We have lots of partners. It's not just City of Gainesville doing it, but we are succeeding in massively reducing violence in our community. And that is a testament to the folks like Ms. Coleman who have done the work and are doing the work. And a lot of you in the audience today are doing that work because, again, you don't get business investment in neighborhoods that don't feel safe. So that is a thing we're doing. We're also just putting real money and real investment in creating places where business can be done. That may not be perfect, but it's a start.
Hello. My question is really related to the schools. Is it not on already?
Like this.
Oh, okay. My question is related to the schools, but I am a small business proponent as well, and anything will work if you make it work, and that's what we miss sometimes. We're not working to make a thing work, and it takes people with the knowledge and experience for that. But with regards to the schools, while I spent most of my time in major corporations, I have taught at every level, and I've substituted from elementary to high school. And one thing I noticed in substituting and in being in the classroom is that there is a serious lack of discipline. And Alachua County is one of the worst with regards to it. I actually taught when I first came back to Florida many years ago over in Levy County, and the principal I had was a no-nonsense principal, and he didn't tolerate a bunch of stuff. But in Alachua, they tell the teachers, if the child don't want to do it, they don't have to. Don't try to discipline because it will embarrass them in class and what have you. Well, they are already embarrassing themselves and everybody else by not being well behaved. And what my question is, do you have a policy? And if you don't, will you put in place some kind of policy, number one, that will instill some discipline in the school? Because if the teacher can't get control of these students and the teacher can't insist that they learn, then they won't learn, and the children who are motivated to learn are going to be shortchanged as well. So discipline is a really serious issue, and I'd like to hear, especially since I see two school board members I recognize in here, whether or not you're looking to do anything about that.
Yeah, I'll just start. I'll try not to be as long-winded as I've been. I 100% agree with you. And I have heard that across the board. I've experienced it myself as a teacher, and just the disparities. And so much of it is that I call it a lack of will to actually implement anything across the board and then adhere to it. Because we tend to lead from a place of fear. We're afraid of pushback, we're afraid of parents, we're afraid of community. It's easier to do as little as possible and to make it look like we're doing something. And that's just not just education, not just Alachua County Public Schools. I think that's true of almost anybody, any organization, and that's something we have to fight against. And so I think about, what was it, a year ago, 2 years ago, that a majority did pass a discipline policy on the school board. But they passed the option that was like, hey, here's the system and here's all these consequences, but they're optional. So when you give people discretion, when you give people option, even in the very system, what you're saying is, these are rules, but they're not real. It's like how a lot of people treat speeding limits. And, well, honestly, no, it's true. And that's what you see, and you even see it at the school level. Everything is focused on metrics and numbers. And I love metrics, I love numbers, but when the actions behind the metrics and the numbers are dishonest, and there's a huge incentive for the actions behind the numbers to be dishonest. Because if the pressure from the top is, you need to do something about the disparity in your discipline, then what are you gonna do? You're gonna fudge the numbers. Instead of implementing policies and actually changing behaviors, you're just gonna make it look better. And I've heard from tons of teachers who were pressured to withdraw referrals, who were pressured never to write them in the first place. And so then to me, it is top down. And so I'll just give an example. I taught at Lincoln. When I taught at the school, it was chaotic. And I would say that came from weak leadership who just wasn't willing to be hard on the kids. And now you have a principal, Darren Jones, who's complete opposite. He's really hard on the staff. He's really hard on the kids. There are uniform expectations for everybody, and there are no exceptions. The only exception you get as a student is those first few days that you're at Lincoln if you're a new student, where he gives you a pass off certain rules. Like today, kids wear headphones as status symbols. He does not allow any kids to wear any headphones. They stay in the backpack. If he sees them, he takes it. If he sees you with your phone out, he takes it. He doesn't care about the consequences for him. He doesn't care about criticism from parents or from the district because he's trying to create order. I visited the school a month and a half, 2 months ago. I was there almost the entire day. And there's an intersection. Back in when I was at Lincoln, they always put the biggest male teachers at that intersection to try to do things to control the kids, but it was always still chaos. Kids were pushing each other. You would see play fighting, which is, just fighting, a lot. No, for real though. Like we would call it rough housing back in the day, but to me, it's fighting. Yeah. And I was there the other day. I was the only adult in that intersection during a class change, and I only had to correct one student. And I just want you to know that, like, to me, it's a leadership thing, is if you're the principal at that school site, are you setting high expectations and do you have high standards, not just for your staff, but for your students too? And even teachers were like, you know what, first I didn't like it, but now I see how important it was. I resented that change and how hard he was, but I realized how much easier he's made my life. And I didn't just hear that from one teacher, I heard that from a lot. And I'm still friends with a lot of teachers there, and I just hearing the whole journey. So to me, it's being very intentional from the top down. We need strict policies. They have to apply to everybody, and then we have to back up our principals, who have to back up our teachers in having these high expectations for our kids. And that's, to me, what we need to start doing.
Mayor, you have to leave at 11:40?
Oh, sorry.
You got about?
I've got a few minutes, yeah.
You sure? Okay, all right, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kiara Thompson. I am wondering, so I work on a project called SADI, and we partner with the African American Studies Department at University of Florida, as well as with the district with John Ream. And what we do is we partner together to bring students to University of Florida on a campus tour. And the group of students that we bring are from the African American Studies course at Eastside. And my question is, the students, the group of students we work with, they're from Eastside, right? But a lot of them have never even been to UF campus, which is only about 10, 15 minutes away. And so we talk about the kids dreaming and seeing themselves and having people who look like them be an example for them. So my question is, are you all building community partnerships that support educational programs and organizations that are geared towards improving student access to tangible experiences that empower them to believe they have a future or that they can achieve and be successful?
Let me start out with that one. Since you mentioned the Eastside High School,
Yes.
A thing that I'm proud of, but that is shocking to me, Eastside High School opened its doors in the early 1970s, more than 50 years ago. I know that's hard to believe, but the 1970s were more than 50 years ago, the early 70s. I am the first graduate of Eastside High School to be mayor of Gainesville. That is shocking to me. We have a lot of folks who grew up in Gainesville who have been mayor. A number of Gainesville High graduates. Our previous mayor, Lauren Poe, was a graduate of JHS, and so have been many other mayors. Many mayors have been graduates of Buchholz High School, which opened the same year as Eastside. But I'm the first graduate of Eastside to be mayor. I'm hopeful I won't be the last, but it is, you talk about, it being about kids from Eastside, and I'll tell you, black or white, never having been to UF. The only thing I ever went to campus for as a young person was once a year maybe to see a football game. That was it. To do anything academic, that wasn't the world that we lived in east of Waldo Road. And that is, I mean, Waldo Road is a real barrier in this community. That's the tracks. That's where the tracks actually used to run. That's, so it's the right side of the tracks, wrong side of the tracks, right? The old thing. I don't know what we're doing to bridge that, except that we need to not only bring kids from Eastside, again, black or white, to schools outside the city, but to universities outside the city, which happens a lot. I mean, there are always bus trips and things to FAMU, to Florida State, to other schools. We need to get them across town as well. And that really just doesn't happen very often. And I'm really glad you said that. I had not considered that we at the city don't have a program for that, but we need to have a program for that. Thank you for that. We will make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then just really quick on that too, and it's something I've talked about. I don't know what it was like for a lot of y'all. I'm used to going on a lot of field trips as an elementary school student and everything. And that whole idea was exposing kids to different things, different jobs, different environments. And today we don't do that. Kids go on maybe 1 or 2 field trips. And to me, we need to implement a standard field trip every year for students that is very intentional, that exposes them to things. It's like you visit Santa Fe, you go to the zoo, you go to UF, and maybe you go to the planetarium at UF, or things like that. Or even exposing them to things like, hey, I don't know if that's even possible, but like, here's what GRU does, and here's a plant, and let's explore that and just understand how energy works. Because to me, this is where the future is. It's in a lot of these jobs. It's in things like green jobs, because a lot of these office jobs, things like that, my generation definitely went to school for, aren't going to exist in 10 years. And so, that's the stuff I'm really interested in. But
Thank you. It is 11:30. Let's take a moment. Let's everybody just stand up for a moment. Sitting like this is like smoking cigarettes. Unless you got out a cushion for the pushing, these seats are kind of hard. Just give you a chance to shake your arms and say hello. I'm going to give Mayor an opportunity to get ready to get out. Let's give the Mayor one more round of applause, please. I have one question here and one in the back. Why don't you come on up, please? And then we have a presentation, so I won't be able to get through all of my slides. But anyway, doesn't matter. You may be seated, but I wanted to get some. I didn't want you doing exercise, because we're not going to get y'all mouth to mouth if you pass out. We got one question here first, and you, okay? But what I want you to see, though, is African Americans in this country have never gained anything that was not in the midst of terror. Terror. One of the tools of an Africana critical theoretical framework is to take into account the role of opposition, racism, white supremacy, and oppression when you're thinking about how to move a community forward. And as you have on the board, Mr. Matthew Louis founded and published the Gainesville Sentinel. He didn't do that when everybody was on his side. As a matter of fact, if you do a study of riots during the 1900s, you will discover that one of the first things that the vigilantes burned down were publishing houses. Again, I want you to understand how education as a civil right is so important, and that the dominant culture constantly prevents or attempts to prevent the education of Black people by controlling the intellectual and educational narrative. So we have 2 more questions, and then we're going to have a presentation.
Thank you. I am a lifelong Floridian, lifelong Alachua County resident. Go home. I'm also the great-granddaughter of slaves. My parents believed in education as the equalizer and valued it, even though my mom had a 6th grade education, my dad didn't finish high school. They pushed us to excel. My question is, I am really, really concerned about education. I just had a great-granddaughter, and what I'm hearing today has just been, you're scaring me. What can I do to help? I mean, if these edicts are coming down from Tallahassee and they're not working for us, if we can't test students before the 3rd grade, or it doesn't count, or whatever the case is, as you know, I volunteer in the school, I will read to kids, I'm a retired. What can we do to help you help our children? What can we do?
So other than going back in time and changing some election results, for real. One of the biggest things is that I would say, even amongst myself before I took office, there's a misunderstanding, at least publicly, about what the school board's powers are. right, in reality versus what people do see them as. And oftentimes, all the community will think that we have this control, right? I can go and tell the principal to do something, I can go tell a member of staff to do something, or that I can tell the superintendent to do something. And that it's really kind of eye-opening when I tell them, actually, I, as one individual board member, have zero authority over any person. I have zero power as one individual. I only have a power in the group as the board, and then even then, the board only oversees the superintendent and can direct no other employee. We can generally direct the superintendent to have staff do things, right? But even then, right, we can't discipline employees unless it's brought to us. We can't fire them, we can't demote them. We can't even deny the hiring of somebody that comes before us that we vote on, that unless we literally have information that somehow shows that they didn't meet the qualifications, but we aren't even given all the applications and all that information. A lot of that is ministerial. And so what our power really is as advocates, and then as a group, it's making policy. And again, I am one individual. And then even then, a lot of folks think that like school board members are talking outside the meetings. It's illegal for us to discuss anything outside the meeting because of the Sunshine Law. And so often when you're watching these meetings, if you watch them, I don't blame if you don't. There's a certain level of insanity you need to watch the meetings of local government. But we only act in concert. And so what we need to do is really push for that. And I'm going to start really I'm calling it almost like a tour, but just start publicly speaking about a vision for the future once we get out of the mess we're in now. Because I feel like we're setting the stage for big changes and for changing education here in Alachua County Public Schools. And what we really need is that public support. We need people to show up, and because it's really not enough for just a majority of the school board to want something. As we see now, a majority of the school board wanting something doesn't mean it's going to happen in our public schools, because who has to do this? It's staff. And it's a staff that the school board has zero control over. And what we see is there's internal politics. So for example, if you're a superintendent and you're a staff and you don't like their current school board majority, what you can do is just do everything you can to wait them out and resist. You can, as the previous superintendent did, literally not follow directives passed by a majority of the school board. Like 100%, just didn't happen, right? And what happens is the school board has to keep them accountable. But to do that, the public support needs to be there for the school board to hold people accountable, because what's gonna happen is everything is politics. People are gonna bring out their allies, people are gonna bring out everyone they can to speak over in the meeting and try to make it seem like the overwhelming support's on the opposite side. I know that the overwhelming support in Alachua County Public Schools is for big change to help our kids, because nothing's been done in any meaningful way. And so that's what we really need. And it's that support. When this comes, you're going to hear a lot of voices. You're going to hear a lot of things like that are telling you don't trust, and to keep things the way they are. Because it's a lot of people who are making a lot of money and are very invested in keeping things the way they are. And just, we need help with that.
Well, that's education now. I stay out of that lane.
This is our last question, and then we have a presentation. Yes.
Okay, quick comment on your last slide. I hope that 1913 rendition of Star Spangled Banner included Slaveholder Key's third verse. Wait, what? Yeah, check out that third verse. Okay. All right. My experience when I started grade school was an inner city Detroit school. And because of my parents, inner city allotted school, because the teachers there had an inestimable depth of love and high expectations, and because my family had the privileges. My mother was college educated, had an office job that did not exhaust her physically. My father had some college education and became a Detroit real estate tycoon almost. And so my mother had time to have me on the lap. I was reading before age 3. You can't wait till 3rd grade. They got that 3 in the wrong place. So the kids have to have the basis, not that they have to magically be confident, but the basis of self-confidence. Zora Hurston was right when she criticized desegregation, that Black kids would not have the love, support, the expectations to succeed, as well as physical security. So that means you gotta have the whole family supported so they can have a decent enough life to have those kids have lap time reading, and so they can intercede at school for their kids. So how is that gonna be brought about? Yeah, I wonder how is that gonna be brought about?
I guess that's me again. I think about just, you hear that, right? And what does it take to hold kids accountable, hold kids to high standards, and give them love? It's really hard. And I think about just my own experience. To be that teacher is really draining. You're giving a lot. You're giving emotions. You're giving a lot of care. And it's really hard to turn that care off. And I'm not sure if y'all know how a lot of teachers go through this, and it can be really hard, but what we're asked to do is to pour out all this love, pour out all this care, pour out all this attention, believe in their potential, believe in their possibilities, not necessarily where they are now, right? And you basically are asked to do that, to almost be this like other guardian, this other parent in their lives. And then what happens, they move on to the next grade and you're no longer supposed to be responsible for them. And if you continue any type of relationship with this student beyond just you as student and teacher, even though you were told that you need to act as a parent to them and be a therapist, it's completely inappropriate for you to still have a relationship with this student. That's asking a lot of any human to give. And then not just that, it comes with criticism from the outside. There's attacks from the state, and then even from the district. We don't approach teachers with any type of grace or compassion that they really deserve for the job they're doing for as little as they're making. And it's something I've been pushing for a lot, and just how we treat employees. Do we give them that grace or compassion, or do we just instantly meet them with judgment? And so, to me, it's just changing the system to at least make that job easier. I know for me, I was somebody who would wake up in the morning before I went to school and I would cry. And only because it was so hard emotionally. And you cry, I wake up, I'd cry, I'd get dressed, wipe away the tears, and go and teach kids, because you have to do that. What other choice do you have, right? Especially if you're motivated by wanting to help our kids. But I just want you guys to think about that, how hard the job is. Everything we need to do in the future is to help support our teachers emotionally, support them financially, and in that it's these big changes we need to make. And then not just that, support them with respect. I want to try to bring respect more from the school district to our teachers as much as we can, but even that is the community too. And there are big forces that are really kind of eroding that trust and education amongst the public. But everyone here, the best thing you can do is just talk to everyone you know. Talk about the importance of teachers and how we need to support them. Even if we are critical of some, we think some can do better. That's going to be true of every single person. How do we help that teacher be better and give them that shot instead of instantly meeting them with judgment? And so that's just my perspective of it, is just how do we make it easier to be that teacher that we ask teachers to be?
Thank you so much. Let's give the whole panel a round, shall we? I'm going to ask Ms. Lee if she will come now. She's going to make a couple presentations, and then I'll make some closing remarks, and then we'll be out of here.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for coming. And as has been the case for each of the last 3 of our other book classes, you all have showed up in numbers that surprised us. But this presentation is for you as a commemoration of your support and attendance at these 4 classes. And what I'm going to have to do is reverse the process that I was started because of the numbers. So the first thing I want to do is see the hands of everybody. And before I do that, let me show you. We have this, and we have this. We're going to try to give everybody who wants one of these, but everybody who attended all 4 sessions of the other book class will get this as well as that. And what it says is a certificate of appreciation, and it's presented to, and you can later add your name if you choose, or leave it blank. And it has April 12, 2025, for attending one or more of the other book class series held as follows: Dispelling the Myth, Pre-Colonial Africa, January 11, 2025, Harn Museum. Enslavement in African County, February 8, 2025, The Hell Homestead. Jim Crow Era in Alachua County, March 8, 2025, County Administration Building, and Civil Rights to Today, April 12, 2025, the Cotton Club Museum. So at this time on the honor system, may I see the hands of the people who have attended all 4 sessions. And our angel helpers are going to bring you your certificates and your books. Keep your hands raised so you can get your appreciation gift. And we certainly want to do this again, and we certainly want to do it with young people as well, that's in high school and middle school and at whatever level that can understand this. So they're coming.
Dr. Nutter wants to.
The certificates that you have, here's my hope. I hope that you will look at them and say, damn, I ought to do something. Maybe I ought to pull some folks together. Maybe I ought to talk to Dr. Stevenson. Maybe I ought to do something to help move this along. Now, you're going to have to forgive me because I'm an old man and sometimes I stumble and I get paranoid. And I'm damn paranoid now because I think our democracy and all the things that are represented by the people who live through what our classes have talked about, all of that is in danger if we don't do something. I'm reminded that we have resources all around us. Someone just reminded me as I was coming up here. She said, Ron, would you please tell people that we have a whole section of African-American stories and tales and books for children at Friends of the Library. It'll be part of the sale. I remember there's even 10-cent day at the sale. So you can't go too wrong. Thank you for coming. I hope to see you in other settings, other places. And I hope that you will look at that certificate and also say, you know, John Lewis is right. There is such a thing as good trouble, and go at it.
Thank you so much. If you take a picture of this link, where's Jackie? Sister Jackie did a marvelous job with representing what the other book is about. Again, we had no idea. We had no idea what this thing would be. We just knew it was something we had to do. So once again, give yourself a big round of applause. Thank you so much for coming. And we're praying about what we're going to do next. God bless you. Have a good day.